Hello, I'm joined by Congressman Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, ranking member of the Intelligence Committee. Congressman, always a pleasure to see you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good to be with you.
Let me ask you to start with your reaction to what Senator McCain and others are talking about. What's going on?
Well, it's deeply concerning that the Russians are involved militarily at all, but it's even more distressing that they seem to be bombing non-ISIL targets. It may explain one thing, and that is why they're not with us to deconflict, because you can imagine if they sat down with our forces and said, here's where we're going to be bombing, and we point out there's no ISIL in that area, they would have to come clean and say, well, we're not really after ISIL. All we're there to do is prop up Bashar al-Assad.
But Congressman, imagine if they're going after those forces that are considered to be less radical, more probably willing to accept our training and, spending $500 million on 5 fighters. I mean, if they get these people, what's in the future? How do we deal with that part of the world?
Well, this is really the worst case scenario. It's one thing if they're going after ISIL. It's another if they're going after al-Qaeda, the Jabhat al-Nusra part of al-Qaeda. It's another thing in the worst case if they're in fact going after the moderate rebels that we are supporting. I will say this in distinction to your prior guest, and that is I think the regime very much does distinguish between terrorist groups and the more moderate opposition, and that is that Bashar al-Assad has always wanted this to be a fight between he and the terrorists, and so he has concentrated his firepower on the moderates to effectively make it so that if he can annihilate the moderates, then it really is a choice between he and the terrorists. And the Russians now seem to be bought into that strategy. So by the Russians, if they're going after the moderates, if they can further marginalize and eliminate moderates from the battlefield, then it helps their narrative, because all that's left then is al-Qaeda, ISIL, and the regime.
But of course, when you do have ISIS and ISIL, and they are clearly a terrorist group, and then you have a regime that bombs its own people, gasses its own people, kills men and women and children, that definition could also apply to that regime. Congressman,
absolutely.
And that's a real troubling situation, that it seems like we're going to get more people leaving that country because that's their only choice. But I want to talk to you about this Benghazi issue, because you sit on the Benghazi committee. I want to play for you what House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy had to say about the committee.
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping. Why? Because she's untrustable. But no one would have known any of that had happened had we not thought and made that happen.
Your reaction to that, Congressman?
Well, it's appalling, but at one level not surprising, because, for some time I think those of us in the committee have known this is not about what happened in Benghazi. It's not about the loss of these 4 Americans, tragically. No, it's a political tool to be used as a bludgeon against Hillary Clinton. The only thing surprising about it was that he was willing to admit this so publicly and so forthrightly, and that he was proud of it. Proud of this abuse of congressional process and a taxpayer-funded investigative committee. It's why, frankly, even a month ago, long before these comments, I wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying it's time to disband this committee. It's been 16 months, $4.5 million, and we have no new insights about anything that happened in Benghazi, no new evidence, no new anything. All they have is a political cudgel against Secretary Clinton.
Congressman Adam Schiff, always a pleasure to see you.